Welcome to EAC Speaks, the podcast where we dive deep into the movement to end the HIV epidemic right here in the heart of the South, Arkansas. I'm your host, Eddie Wiley, and together we're going to explore the stories, insights, and passion that fuels engaging Arkansas community's mission. Join us on this journey as we unite voices and take meaningful steps toward a world free of HIV stigma. Now, get ready for a conversation that matters. This is EAC Speaks. Hello, out there in podcast land. It's me, Eddie, your host for EAC Speaks, and welcome to another episode. So this episode, we're going to be focusing on Zero HIV Stigma Awareness Day. It's celebrated on July 21st, and it's a day where we stand together to confront and eliminate the stigma surrounding HIV. This day serves as a powerful reminder of the ongoing fight against discrimination faced by those of us living with HIV. By spreading awareness, fostering empathy, and educating ourselves and others, we can break down barriers and ignorance and fear. Let us all commit to supporting a world where everyone, regardless of their HIV status, is treated with dignity and respect. Together, we can create a future free from HIV stigma, and that's exactly why we have Mr. EAC himself, Mr. Danny Harris, who's the Executive Director of Engaging Arkansas Communities. Hello, Danny.
Hey, Eddie. It's great to be here.
I'm glad you're back. You're joining us again on EAC Speaks.
I believe it was the first one that we did, wasn't it?
Yes, I think it was our first episode.
Very first episode.
So, Danny, maybe remind the people who you are.
Well, I'm Danny Harris, and I am the Executive Director and Chief Servant of EAC, Engaging Arkansas Communities. I'm located in the Little Rock office, but tend to scatter myself all over the state.
Danny gets around.
Yes.
Now, Danny, tell us, you mentioned Chief Servant. I love that title. Does that have any significance for you?
It does. We as an organization believe that we're here to serve a certain population, to specialize in that type of service of that population. And so if the executive director, the one that is looked at as the perceived leader, cannot address themselves as a chief servant, then we have no business being in business. And so we as our board adopted this addition to my title, my job title. And so officially I am the executive director and chief servant.
I love that. That is amazing. 10 snaps. Okay.
All right. And that service primarily is directed at this point towards my staff. I'm here to serve my staff and to show them what a servant's heart should be. And so hopefully that works its way into my staff as they go into the communities they work with.
I love that. I've met several members of your staff, and they have that same passion for service. And so I think it's resonated well. So kudos to you, Danny.
Yes, thank you.
Of course. So we're talking about stigma, and my favorite phrase is spread awareness, not stigma. So tell me, how does HIV stigma affect all of the public health efforts that we put into practice and to combat the virus? How does that stigma affect those efforts?
Well, there's a lot of things we could talk about in regards to that, but I think it's actually pretty simple in that it hinders HIV prevention and HIV treatment efforts, as well as enabling and allowing people to feel comfortable in being being stigmatizing others. And so to me, that's the way that it affects public health efforts is that it is, first of all, preventing, but it's also enabling some people to feel comfortable in doing that stigma.
Yes. So there are challenges that we typically face, regardless of our status, because if we have, like you said, prevention efforts are also affected. So people may not want to get tested. Mm-hmm. And for people who are living with HIV, they may not want to get in treatment. So talk to me about some of the challenges that you see or that you may have faced due to HIV stigma.
For my own personal experience, I can relate back to after my diagnosis. About 6 months in, on my 6-month checkup, I was told that I needed to start taking medication. And I was very reluctant. And for nearly a year, I wouldn't take the medication because in my mind, I was led to believe and always felt in my heart that only those who are sick need it, and only those that were engaging in certain types of activities would need to take that medication. And I was neither. In my mind, I was not sick and I was not engaging in that type of activity. So I wouldn't need to take medication just yet. And so in my mind, I had that internal battle, whereas I should have immediately started taking the medication and it would have made me healthier at that point. But because I was hearing the messages that were being told to me about HIV and HIV treatment, and I wouldn't take the medication to start. And so I think that that's the challenges, is that it affects people individually a little differently, but it affects everybody in this whole prevention and treatment process.
That internalized stigma is a booger. I
Mhm.
remember also being in a similar predicament, going to the doctor, and I knew I needed to take medication, but I was more so afraid of what people would think
Yes.
if they knew that I was living with HIV. And mind you, I think I had been working in the field forever. I had met you before I seroconverted, so it was a difficult thing. So we also have to remember internalized stigma. So during our conversation today, folks, remember that stigma comes from external practices, but also internally.
Mhm.
So let's talk about, you mentioned how it impacts a lot of people. What about around the world? Why do you think it was so important for us to have a zero HIV stigma day?
Obviously, my my experiences around the world are very limited. I've only put my foot outside of the boundaries of this country twice, and that was in Jamaica and once in Canada. I put myself across the border just so I could say that I had. But in what I see and hear, everybody has different ideas, beliefs. They have different norms, religious practices. Anywhere you go, everybody is different. And so HIV is often looked at in different lenses all around the world. So their stigma is not always going to be the same as what is that I deal with. But I think that there are some universal ones that affects everybody, that it is universally looked at as a negative, having negative connotations with HIV. And so guilt and shame are often a part of that are produced in the lives of people. So, if you go to one country, they may have a slightly different approach to it, but those that same feeling of negativity is there, and that it makes you feel like somehow you are something less than what they are and everybody around you.
Yes, definitely. We have a lot of folks that we know from across the world, maybe experiencing things, like you said, differently. But it's really important to note that some of those same foundational things or effects of stigma, like guilt, shame, feeling like a burden, those things are universal mostly across. So, talk to me about some of those successful strategies that you have seen to reduce stigma in different communities.
That's a hard question, Eddie, honestly, because I'm an old man and I have seen this since the beginning, and I cannot honestly say that you can that we can say stigma has changed a lot. That it's been pretty much the same from the beginning all the way through. And so I don't know that you can come up to, I don't know that you can go and write down successful strategies for fighting against it. We can have some suggestions that we think would help improve from our own experiences. Things like, you know, getting all the facts correct, that educational component where people need to learn and to understand. But we have seen from the beginning that people won't learn and they won't accept the facts. Um, Watching our words and the language that we use, you know, um, even those that are most involved in our treatment and prevention continue to use words that are stigmatizing in their marketing and in their brochures and in the staffing, that they allow those that language and words to continue. But for me, I think that I would say that we have stressed having safe spaces, but I think we need to be more concentrating on brave spaces, people can bravely speak their experiences and their testimony and their, you know, what their truth might be. And if we can ever get to the point where people feel brave in all of the spaces of their life, then I think that we see that effect expanding all over.
Yes, I love that. Creating brave spaces for folks. And I think like you said, our folks that are in the fight against HIV sometimes don't use the correct language, and we know words and language matters when it comes down to it. So I think it's important when we do have campaigns or when we do have social media um, campaigns or even toolkits for folks, they should probably consult the community a little bit more when it comes down to it.
If you want to see me bristle, call me infected.
Oh,
And I'm gonna bow up because I don't believe myself to be infected. And yet I hear that word in every single conference and every single session that I'm receiving information from people that are training. I'm infected, or risky behavior. You know, how many people were exposed to HIV and all they were doing was loving the person they were with, not out anywhere other than in their own home with somebody that they were in a relationship with. So we stigmatize it by some of the words that we use and
yeah.
continue to do so.
I think it's good to have like these language guides, and I'm like, y'all don't even follow the stuff that you put out, so stop sending it out if you're not gonna follow it. So yeah, we got to put a little more pressure on that, which leads to my next question: how important is advocacy in the fight against HIV stigma?
It's hard for me to think about advocacy in terms of the broad aspect because it seems like we have continued to fight the same battle for all this whole time, and we're not seeing major changes. It's the same themes that keep coming up over and over again. And so I tend to think that maybe it's got to be a little more grassroots approach where our communities become more familiar with those that are advocating for them or those that want to be an advocate. If you and I don't know each other, it's hard for you to feel comfortable for me speaking for you in a public setting. And I think that if advocates are given if people living with HIV are given that brave space where they can bravely speak their truth and bravely speak about their experiences, that perhaps advocacy becomes easier because people now are acquainted with the character of that person and their why and what they're attempting to do. I think advocacy has to be more along those lines for it to be effective. And then it spreads like wildfire throughout the continent. National advocacy, you know, it seems like we're fighting the same battles, and I struggle with that.
Hmm. Yeah. It takes a lot of levels, like you said, of advocacy, whether it's national, then we get to regional, then we get state, then we get very even more so local. And I think it advocacy even goes down to individual levels. So
Hmm.
we talk about even
Yes,
having support systems for
right.
folks. So what support systems have you found most helpful in managing both HIV and the associated stigma?
Well, when I first started in my trek, the in my adventure, the only option I had for support was a local support group that was found in Northwest Arkansas, and they had an old Yahoo chat room. I, I had never even used a Yahoo chat room, and they added me to that and showed me how to use it. And there was a couple of people in there that would answer my questions and help me to understand what the next steps would be and what I would expect and what should happen when I would go to the doctor. And so from that point, I was able to understand what I needed to be doing for myself and how I needed to take care of myself. And so for me, the strongest um, self advocacy that I have found has been through groups like that we have had around the state of Arkansas, where you have peers helping peers, people that have lived experiences helping those that are just starting their walk and their journey with HIV, that they can understand how to get through that process and learning how to trust the process. And so for me, it's been the support programs, the empowerment programs that have been most effective. And I've tried to initiate that in many areas around Arkansas through the years, as well as here at EAC. We have three of those groups that we currently are trying to keep going.
Cool. Would you like to tell us about those groups?
Well, it started out of Texarkana, and we call it Empower You, and it's a capital M with little power and then the big U. So it's Empower You, and so the whole purpose is to bring in people that are long-term survivors, as well as bring in people that are just starting, so that they can encourage each other. They learn how to manage the different steps of the process of getting into care, as well as the emotions and the feelings and the experiences that each one is having over the past month. And we've got one in Little Rock, Fort Smith, and we have a Spanish speaking one. And so that Spanish speaking one is spending a lot of time helping those that don't speak English to be able to maneuver the sometimes confusing Ryan White processes and treatment processes that are completely hard for a person speaking English to understand, much less somebody that doesn't speak the same language. And so for me, that's been the most influential thing for me.
Yeah. That it's funny that, well, what I'm about to say, because it should not be something that is groundbreaking, but that is groundbreaking to have something for people who do not, whose primary language is not
Mm-hmm.
English, because as you said, navigating Ryan White is difficult for those of us who was born speaking, or not born speaking English, but speak English
Yes.
since childhood. So navigating that where they don't have documents in Spanish, or they don't have translators
Mm-hmm.
who actually go to these appointments with us. So that is some amazing, amazing work. Empower You. So folks out there, tap into those areas. Make sure you're navigating that. And if you do have Spanish speaking loved ones, get them connected.
Yes. Bring them here.
Absolutely. And you mentioned those emotions and those well-beings. We just recently, not recently, we recently passed Mental Health Awareness
Mm-hmm.
Month. So tell me, what advice would you give to others living with HIV to absolutely maintain their mental well-being?
Well, obviously, that first we just mentioned, find a good support group and good support. Um, if it's not a group of others living with HIV, find some that are willing to assist you. But that find a good support group has been one of my favorite things to recommend to help keep that mental health balance, because um, sometimes you just need somebody to talk to, you know. And this is kind of off the topic just a little bit, but as an example, we were talking about HIV and people living with HIV in the context of the faith-based community at one of our groups late recently. And the thought was said that, well, why would you ever need to disclose your status at church or in a faith-based setting? Why not just keep it to yourself? And that's the whole point, is that there are times HIV does cause certain emotions and feelings and depressions, and if nothing else, just a blue attitude, um, that is not caused by anything else. And I should have an opportunity to be able to express that somewhere, to vent it with someone that might be that encouragement. The other thing I would say in mental health is to trust the process. It's hard to trust people you don't know, and especially when you're facing something like HIV. But there is a process to it, and if you can trust that, you get from where you are now to where you want to be, and um, allow it to happen and stay busy. Don't isolate, don't shut down, don't give up, but stay busy, whether it's working or playing or going to church or serving someone at a homeless shelter. Find ways to stay busy. HIV will mess with your mind because it the loneliness and the isolation that it easily lends itself to. Um, but for me, those three things are probably the best. You know, trust the process, find a good support group, and stay busy.
Yeah, that trusted process really spoke to me because EAC is really walking the walk. Like whatever it is that you just talked about, having people that look like the community or of lived experience from the community is really important because, as you said, you don't really. HIV is a place where you have to trust folks that work in the field kind of soon, but it's hard to trust someone that you don't know, just as you mentioned. But having someone that looks like you, or maybe not even look like you, but has a relatable spirit, I think is something that is important. And EAC is absolutely doing that and showing people because it's good to have a website where you can actually see who you're going to talk to, or you have videos or podcasts or social media. So it makes it a little less scary for folks when they can absolutely see that. So yes, amazing on that piece as well. Groundbreaking. We're doing some groundbreaking stuff in
Yeah.
Arkansas.
Well, and it, to continue that thought is I can stand to someone when I say trust the spot, trust the process. I can say, look at me. You know, do you when you look at me, do you see HIV? Do you see somebody that is struggling? Do you see somebody that is a victim or infected, or what do you see? And my staff is the same way. You can look at them and they're coming from all over different places, different types of lifestyles, different types of backgrounds and cultural backgrounds. Everything is different. And so they can say the same thing. Look at me. I've come from where you are right now. Look at where I am. I've made it through. I've overcome. And you can too. And here's the way we're going to do it.
Love that. So let's talk about Zero HIV Stigma Day. How do you think communities can come together to support this awareness day? Because, as you know, this is not one of the main five or the top three, top five of the awareness days. How can communities come together to support Zero HIV Stigma Day?
I think we've just we've got to get we've got to keep getting the word out. We've got to keep speaking the educational part. We've got to make sure that we have the variety of ways of getting that information out for people to see. But I think that finding ways for people to feel like they're a part of what we're doing and including members of the community in what we're doing. Education does not always modify behavior. People may learn something or they may hear something, but it doesn't always modify their behavior. It's when you pull them into actually becoming involved in what you're doing, that's when you begin to see behavior modified. A good example, my father was a very racist person, and there was never anyone of color in the community that we lived at in all the years of growing up. And I would hear him say negative things about people of color often. The good Lord saw to it that he was put into a management position in which his whole staff was made up of people of color. And it took him just a matter of time to realize just how good these people were. And by the time he passed away, he was counting one of the women that was working for him as his adopted mother. So you could have educated him all you wanted at that beginning. He would have still had those negative attitudes. But when he got involved, it changed him. And he no longer used that terminology, he no longer used that word because he realized through his involvement where he was wrong and where difference was. And I think that's the process we've got to capture in um, days like this. And so we've got to be involved in community events. We've got to be involved in, churches. We got to be involved everywhere to let people see our message, our truth, our testimony, and our message of overcoming so that they can enjoy that with us. And maybe stigma will start taking a seat back at the back of the bus.
Oh, not the back of the bus.
Going back there. We don't want you no more. Back
Okay.
door.
So now let's talk about upcoming things. We're in July. What events or what initiatives are you excited about that EAC may be taking on really soon?
Well, the National HIV Testing Day is right around the corner, and this may come out after that day has occurred, but that's a big day for us in helping to get awareness as well as people to understand the need of testing. We have several of our programs that are being pushed in through the recovery centers. We're trying to make a big push there with some of our staff. We're doing a lot of events to help promote the social media aspect of education. So there's going to be some changes on our website. There's going to be some changes in the marketing materials. In our prep approach, there's some changes that will be unfolded over the next few months. So um, there's going to be a facelift of sorts that's going to take place for us in trying to move to the next step and finding some. We've got a couple of programs in the works that we hope get funded that would allow us to get into some educational settings in schools. And so there's a lot of exciting things that are sitting out there. We had some new additions to the board that help us to look forward to expansion in other areas. And so, it's just an exciting time for EAC as far as the possibilities of what the future has for us.
Absolutely. Another epic um, breakout or breaking news for ESC Speaks, because I feel like the website and a lot of the other things that you mentioned are fabulous. So a facelift, I'm like, oh, even better. It gets better than this. So
Yeah.
let's see.
Well,
It's super
we
exciting.
always want to do more, and you always want to be offer more options. One of the things that we do is we track the people that are the traffic on the websites. And one of the things I've noticed on some of the ordering of test kits and ordering people wanting to come into our offices to get tested or asking for information for condoms and stuff, they're listing that they're seeing this on our website. So we want to make it even more friendly. When people see that, how do you get the door open to come in and receive the free services?
Look, see, that's what we teach folks at my 9 to 5. We get the evaluations, we get the data, we get all of this stuff, but actually using it is something that's even more critical, because you're paying attention to what people are bringing you. They're telling you what they want. They're telling you where they're coming from. So if you don't use that information, you're just getting it in vanity. So
Yeah,
that's
and
amazing. I'm glad.
and what you're saying, Eddie, is actually back to the stigma approach. That's one of the problems that we have with dealing with stigma. We've done study after research about stigma, and the information has been being presented, but we're not taking the next step to fix it.
You got to move forward. You
Yes.
got to move forward. I love that. So, Danny, tell the people where they can find you before we go into remarks.
Well, the easiest way to find EAC is, of course, at www.engagingarkansas.org. And you go online, you can find all of our contact information there. And the easiest way to get in touch with me is Danny at engagingarkansas.org. And send that email, and then I'll know that you're looking for me, and I can get in touch with you, and we can do what we need to do.
Cool. Now, tell the folks, is there any parting words for this episode? Because we know you'll be back.
We see you, we hear the message that you're wanting heard, and we want to tell you that we love you.
I love that. We love you, and love should rule the
Yes.
world. Love should rule the world. Well, Danny, I really appreciate you for joining us
Well,
for
thank
another
you.
episode of EAC Speaks. This was amazing.
Yes. Yes. And I think we were a little bit more at ease this time than we were the first time.
Yeah, because that was like the first episode. So it's like, well, what do we need to do? Should we say this? Should we say
And I
that?
like the format we're using here a little better than what we did before, because it was just on the phone before, and this time I feel more engaged because I can see you.
Yes, we like to see each other. Okay, see each other. I love that. Well, Danny, again, thank you for joining us on EAC Speaks. And remember, if you would like to be a guest on EAC Speaks, hit us up. You can reach out to us on the website. You can hit us up on the socials. Call us, beep us if you want to reach us. And we'll see you next
See
time.
ya.
The EAC Speaks podcast is partially supported by the Arkansas Department of Health through a grant funded in part by the CDC. All discussion is solely the responsibility of each participant and doesn't necessarily represent the official views of Engaging Arkansas Communities, the Arkansas Department of Health, CDC, or the U.S. government.